So, Sean, we'll get started with the Fast Five today. What's your name?
Sean Smith.
And what's your farm's name?
Our farm is Clanman, Jerseys.
And where are you located?
We are located at Manitoba, Manitoba. So it's on the western side of the province of Manitoba, not too far from Brandon. It's kind of our closest city.
Oh, yes. And if you're listening to this as soon as it releases, know that some of Sean's weather got down in my country, and I'm not a big fan. What year did you all start grazing animals?
Well, I guess we've kind of always been grazing. Yeah, my grandparents were the first ones to get dairy animals on the farm, but our farm is a century farm. So we got some Jersey cows in the 60s, my grandparents, and they expanded to shipping milk in the 80s. And that's when my dad took over. And yeah, we just grazed the whole time. It never stopped.
Oh, very good. And what livestock do you graze? I heard you mention dairy cattle.
Yes, we are pretty much only a dairy farm. We do a little bit of beef, but majority is dairy. So we have purebred Jersey genetics.
Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, the podcast dedicated to sharing the stories of grass-based livestock producers and exploring regenerative practices that improve the land, animals, and our lives. I'm your host, Gal Hardage, and each week we'll dive into the journeys, challenges, and successes of producers like you, learning from their experiences and inspiring each other to grow and graze better. Whether you're a seasoned grazer or just getting started, this is the place for you. Attention ranchers, ready to improve your land and boost your bottom line? Join Noble Research Institute for its March Ranch Management courses. Business of Grazing in Redmond, Oklahoma, March 4th through 6th. Learn to create detailed grazing plans, optimize profitability, and make smart infrastructure investments. Noble Grazing Essentials in Huntsville, Texas, March 25th through 27th. Discover how to assess carrying capacity, implement adaptive grazing strategies, and develop effective pasture recovery techniques. Expert facilitators with decades of ranching knowledge will guide you through practical field and classroom training. Receive exclusive benefits include virtual meetings and one-on-one consultations. Space is limited. Visit noble.org to enroll and invest in your land, livestock, and legacy. If you're watching on YouTube and you see my cup, this is not my cup. It's my daughter's cup. I got it because it's bigger and it holds more liquid, and I thought I needed more. Okay, Sean, when you were growing up, did you always think, hey, I'm going to stay home and work on the dairy?
For the most part, yeah, like there were some other things I was interested in growing up, but when I was about 13 or so, our family, along with another family, started a 4-H club. And so I got into, I was already in 4-H, just not in dairy 4-H, but we got into dairy 4-H and started showing cattle a little bit at like the achievement and local shows. And that's kind of what really got me, interested in farming and really kind of put a permanent bug in my system in terms of farming.
Now, on your dairy, I spent most of this is really going to show how uncool I was as a teenager. Boy, I wanted to dairy. I was growing up on dairy, knew that's what I wanted to do. I used to love drawing plans for milking parlors, dairy barns, and all the lots to go with it. I spent way too many hours drawing that up. What kind of parlor do you all have?
We built a new barn 7 years ago. And so when we built a new barn, we installed a DeLaval VMS robot.
Oh, yes. What were you milking in a stanchion barn before that?
Yeah, a tie stall. Yeah. Not with old stanchions, just individual stalls.
Oh, yeah. I think those grazing robots, those are what we call cows. The robotic milker, I think, is really fascinating. Before we talk more about your robot and some of the grazing management that causes you to do, when your grandparents got jerseys, why did they go with jerseys?
My understanding is when they first started, they were not shipping fluid milk. They were just shipping the cream.
Oh, yes.
So they would milk their 2 or 3 cows and then separate the cream, and then they'd ship the cream off just like those old metal cream jars that you see,
Oh, yeah.
that every dairy farm has in front of their milk house, painted up nice. Yeah,
Yes.
so they used to just ship cream. So of course jerseys are really high butterfat, so higher cream content. So that's why they started with jerseys, and we've just never
Oh, yeah.
went to anything else.
Yeah. Those milk cans I don't have any at my house. My parents have a couple at their house. My grandparents have a couple that we painted up, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Grandpa used to run a milk route years ago and pick up milk and cream.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But those milk cans are becoming harder and harder to find these days. You just don't see them anywhere.
Yeah, well, not ones that are in good shape. We have some around, but
Right,
they're pretty
exactly.
rusty. I don't know what they'd be worth, but
Right. True. True. So your grandparents got jerseys. They're grazing. They're feeding in a tie barn. What did you or when did you get introduced to regenerative practices? Was that something you brought to the farm? Was that something your parents did, or even your grandparents?
well, my parents and my grandparents especially kind of have always had the mindset that, they're gonna farm in a way that, I guess was thinking about, you know, not just the farm, but kind of the ecosystem around the farm.
Oh,
And
yes.
they're really, loved all animals, loved waterfowl, especially. My grandparents were big into duck hunting and goose hunting. So they loved their waterfowl. So they wanted to keep all the natural aspects of the farm that they could. And so they weren't really the type of people who were pushing bush down to make more cropland or anything like that. And so that's kind of like the mindset that was passed on to my dad too. It's just that
Oh,
we're gonna
yes.
farm in a way that, we can be profitable, but we're not gonna get rid of all the natural habitat. And then my dad also kind of has always had the mindset of just he was gonna do stuff in ways that reduce the labor in the barn. Because especially with a tie saw, in our tie saw, it was all small squares. That's all we fed. So
Oh,
we
yes.
were bringing in like 40 to 50 small squares a day by hand. And so when you're doing that every day, you start thinking of ways you can do less and less of that. And the
Right.
easiest way is to let the cows go out and graze themselves. And so, yeah, like that's kind of how he always farmed, is just like, I'm going to get these cows outside as quick as I can in the spring and leave them out there as late as I can in the fall. And so he'd do that by, feeding bales out on pasture in the spring before it's green, and same within the fall. Let them out during the day all the way till December to try to just keep them under the barn so it was less work in the barn. And so it wasn't really regen as much as it was, trying to cut down on that labor aspect of it in the barn.
Oh, yeah.
And then, yeah, I guess we've always been, yeah, like I said, we've always been grazing. We had some employees from New Zealand and Australia and the UK that were spent summers here, and they really helped us improve our grazing.
Oh, yes.
Of course, New Zealand is known for its good grazing management. So they helped us improve that. So with our dairy herd, we were moving them twice a day for the last 30 years, trying to get as much milk as we can from grazing. And so, yeah, we were doing all these things, but we didn't really know it was regen, or no one called it regen then.
Right.
Yeah. And until I guess 2010, my dad went to a holistic management little weekend workshop thing. And that's kind of when the word regenerative ag started being used. And then we kind of started doing a bit more of our own research and guess kind of focusing on that type of farming.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Doing it way before it got cool and got a name like regenerative.
Yeah.
Now, with your grazing and starting that so far back, I assume you all were using some reels and poly wire early on.
Yeah, we were using that like poly tape even before there was like good
Oh, yeah.
wire, which that stuff was not very fun to work with. And and fiberglass posts that give you slivers if you're not wearing gloves.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, that's how long ago we were doing it. But yeah, nowadays we've we've too many reels to keep track of, to be honest, on our farm at this point. And yeah, we still do a lot of polywire fencing and lots of, whether it's multi moves a day or every second day, depending on what our goal is and what group of animals it is.
Oh, yeah. Now, something I haven't asked of our guests in a long time that I used to ask more often, but do you have some preferred brands of reels and posts that you use in polybraid?
I like the pigtail posts. I think, yeah, no, I can't even blanket on names here. Gallagher, I think, makes like the lighter kind of pigtail ones. So I like their posts. Staffix makes the best, in my opinion, the best connectors, like the handle for when you're connecting, because you can do the positive or you can like connect a positive, or you can just connect it and end it right there. Like
have a dead handle.
Yeah, dead handle. So those ones are nice. And I think, I don't know, I probably have a preference of the Gallagher reels at this point. They seem to last a bit longer, be a bit more hardy.
Oh, yeah. Do you get the reels that's got all the, I've complained about this on a past episode, with the guard to keep your hand from hitting the poly braid, and then they have the little latch on the end that keeps it on the fence?
Yes. Yeah, we have the one that has the latch to keep it on the fence, the Gallagher one. Yeah.
Yeah. Because those little extras drive me a little crazy, because it's like, I don't need all this. But then again, when I'm not getting shocked by the poly braid, I'm like, okay, maybe it's not so bad, because I've thrown a reel or two on the ground before.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, those guards to keep the reel, or like the poly on the reel, they can be handy, because if you get going fast and you're not quite paying attention, then all of a sudden you look down, you have a rat's nest. And I've just got to the point
too often.
I just got to the point where I just cut the wire at this point.
Yeah.
Don't have enough time to try to undo that.
Yeah, I've had rat's nest happen too often, and yeah, no fun.
Yeah.
Now, one thing with your dairy that's going to be a little different than when we talk about like beef cattle or hair sheep and grazing them, your cows have to come back to the dairy barn every day.
Yes.
So do you have some lanes fixed up for them to get out to different paddocks?
So the way we have it set up is we're lucky. Our barn is pretty much in the center of our quarter section. And so it gives us lots of opportunities of pastures to reach to. So we have about 14 paddocks, all between 5 and 10 acres, and then laneways to each of them. And so, so our cows in the summer months, basically they have 24-hour access to the pasture, but they have to go through the robot before they can access that pasture.
Oh, okay.
And so that's just a way to make sure that they are visiting the robot, because you still want them to get milked at least 2 times a day. And so we have a series of one-way gates where once they go through the robot, they can go through these gates and they can decide to go to pasture, or they can come back into the barn. It's up to them. So that's how.
Do you have to go out to the pasture and bring them in every so often to make sure they go through that?
Usually the only time we're doing that is in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll either call them. They're pretty good at coming to a call, or we'll go get them with the dog and bring them in.
Yeah. You mentioned 14 paddocks of varying sizes. Are those semi-permanently or permanently fenced that way? And then do you break them up any when you turn the cows out by giving them a portion of it?
Yeah. So they're all permanently fenced with a single strand high tensile.
Oh, okay.
And then when we're giving them pasture every day, we are using polywire to split those up even more so.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So yeah, we're usually giving them between like 1/2 and 3/4 of an acre per twice a day type thing. So.
Yeah. Which sounds like that all work really good. I'm kind of curious about your robot milker. I think you said you got it about 7 years ago. Did that change your grazing when you installed that? And for instance, what I'm thinking about, were you able to graze more efficiently, or did it kind of put a damper on it because you're not moving the whole herd at one time? How did it affect your grazing?
It has limited the amount we can graze in terms of our cows' daily dry matter intake. So
Oh, okay.
back in the old barn, they would pretty much get 100% of their dry matter from grazing. They would get a little bit of grain twice a day when they came in to get milked, but otherwise they would just be on grass. Whereas nowadays they are getting between 40 and 60% of their daily dry matter from grazing, depending on the season
Oh, yeah.
and what what type of forage they're eating. So we still do mix a TMR every day and put it in the barn, and they still eat that as well as grazing.
You're located in Canada, so selling milk's a little bit different there. You all have a quota that you're working with. How has that affected your all's operation? And maybe just for people not familiar with your base or quota, whatever wording you use for it, can you describe what that is for them?
Yeah, for sure. So we call it the supply management system. And so basically the idea is that Canada is only going to produce enough milk for Canadians. So we're not going to overproduce and export. And then so we're only producing for what our, domestic market needs.
Oh, yes.
And so in doing that, we can't overproduce. So therefore every farm has a strict quota that they're allowed to fill. And you can't go over that quota because there's no market for that milk that goes over. And so every farm has a set amount of kgs of butterfat that they're allowed to ship per day. It's all based on your butterfat, how many kilograms of butterfat.
Oh, okay.
It's not based on liters. And so for us, with the grazing, there's a little bit of a challenge in the sense that our butterfat goes down on really fresh grass. So we're not shipping
Oh, yeah.
as many kgs every day, but there's also, you can stockpile some kgs in the form of what they call credits, where you can, like, if you don't fill them this month, you can fill them next month type thing. So
Oh,
we
okay.
do have a bit of flexibility that makes it so that if we don't ship as much in the summer, we can make up for that in the winter months. So that's how we make it work for us.
Oh, very good. As a younger person dairying, I always thought the supply management system that Canada had in place was just crazy. I thought, no way. I was very pro capitalism with it, but as I've aged, it really seems like a good method to me now, because here in the US we had a small dairy, but we couldn't keep our costs low enough with the price of milk and everything. We sold out. And when I look at the supply management now, it seems to me that's a good way for smaller dairies to stay in business, because that quota has some value and you've got it.
Yeah. And the biggest thing is we have because we're not ever exporting, we're also restricting imports. So
Oh, yeah.
like Canadian government puts really high tariffs, which we don't need to talk too much about tariffs right
Right.
now, but they put high tariffs on milk products that are imported so that our milk price stays really steady.
Oh, yes.
But the way they set our milk price, just so people don't think that it's like, an inflated milk price that, then you're making consumers pay more. The way they set our milk price is they do a cost of production analysis on multiple farms every year. I think it's about 10% of the farms in Canada. A third
Okay.
party does a cost of production analysis, and then they take that analysis to figure out the average cost of production, and then they set the milk price based on that cost of production. So that then if you're a farmer who is under the average cost of production, you're going to be more profitable. If you're a farmer that's over the average cost of production, you're going to be less profitable. So it's still It's not like we're propping up farms or anything like that. Like, you're still going to be more profitable by trying to reduce your cost of production. And it's
Oh,
still
yeah.
based on an average. So the whole industry is still trying to have that goal of a lower cost of production.
And that really gives you some feedback on what you're doing as you know your costs. And you can say, hey, here's what these guys are averaging. Where do we fall into that? Where can we get better?
Mm-hmm.
That's nice information to have.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's great to be able to like benchmark a little.
Yeah. Let's shift focus just a little bit before we dive deeper into your forages. And and I want to cover genetics. You know, we ran hostings because that's what everybody did, basically.
Yeah.
But then our cows, we grazed them, but we did a little bit of grazing management, but not a lot. And at the time, there was some New Zealand genetics coming in that was more grazing genetics. And I really wanted to use them, and we just didn't get there in the time we dairied. Have you all used any grazing genetics, or are you using pretty standard Jersey genetics?
For the most part, we have just been using North American genetics, like a lot of Canadian and US bulls, kind of a mix of the two because like the genetic pools are different. They go for different things.
Oh, yeah.
Canadian is more high components, butterfat, protein. The US is more high liters of milk.
Oh,
So we kind of use a bit of both to try to get that balance. And then in the last few years, Australian genetics have started making a lot of interest in North America. So we've started using a little bit of them and a little bit of Danish because they have extremely high components, the Denmark jerseys. But we've never gone the route of like looking specifically for grazing genetics.
oh,
For one, our grazing season is only 4.5 to 5 months long. So it's less than half of our year. So if we focus completely on that, well, they might not be as profitable for the other 7 months of the year.
oh, yeah.
And then the other thing is at least I'm hoping this is how it's working on our farm, is that we've been doing this for long enough and that our own genetics and our epigenetics on our farm have adapted to the type of grazing that we're doing.
Oh, yes.
You know, when you have old cows that have been in your herd for, 10 years and you have 7 daughters off her, she's in your herd for 10 years for a reason. It's because she matches your program. And hopefully
Oh, yeah.
that's like how we're getting our own type of genetics that suit our program.
And I think that's valid with when we think about jerseys. Like I mentioned, we milked hostings. And I think there's a bigger discrepancy between the standard North America hosting versus grazing genetics hosting. When I think about jerseys, I don't think maybe that there's that much difference between the two, but I'm sure there's some. Now you mentioned there having an old cow and like 7 heifers out of her. If we've got 2 or 3 heifers out of a cow, we were ecstatic because it's just difficult to raise enough heifers out of a cow. What are you doing so you get so many heifers?
Yeah, we've been using sex semen a lot for the past 10 years, especially, and a little bit before that when the technology just came out. But in the last, 10 years, since I've been very, very heavy using sex semen, very heavy to try to make sure that I'm always getting daughters off my best cows.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so it's got its good things in terms of like our herd has improved a lot in the last 10 years, but we also have way too many heifers on our farm.
Oh,
I'm not
yes.
very good at deciding which ones get the sex semen and which ones just get beef semen. I like my cows too much and I end up breeding them all to sex semen. So
Well, when we dairied, we never had enough heifers. And now we've got beef cows, we never have enough bulls.
yeah,
It's just part of that.
yeah.
Now, are you using I'm not familiar with sex semen. That happened after we were AIing. Except I think I've seen there's like 75% sex semen and there's 90% sex semen, as I recall. Which one are you using, and do you find those numbers pretty accurate?
We pretty much are only using the 90% now.
Oh, yeah.
I think 75 might still be out there available, but it was kind of one of those, it was kind of like a lower price range when they first came out with
Right.
sex semen, and people weren't sure if they wanted to spend twice as much money on semen. So they came out with this 75, but I think pretty much everything is around that 90%.
Oh, okay.
And it's, it seems to be at least that. Like, we get the odd bull that's off of sex semen that's not supposed to be a bull. But for the most part, yeah, we're pretty happy with it. And
Oh,
and the
yeah.
biggest thing is the technology has really improved. So conception rate is really high. When sex semen first came out, your conception rate was lower. And so you're spending more money on the semen and not getting as many pregnancies. But now, especially with jerseys that are very fertile to begin with, our conception rate's pretty high with sex semen. So we're pretty happy with
Oh,
it.
yeah. Yeah. Before we move off of jerseys a little bit, are majority of your cows A2 A2?
I don't, I mean, I think, like it's something like 70% of Jersey breed is A2 at this point.
Right. I thought it was a really high
Yeah.
percentage for
So
jerseys.
I think our herd is probably around that. If there's a really good bull that has A1, I'll probably still use them, but
Oh, yeah.
most of the semen companies are only taking A2 bulls at this point. So that's
Oh,
like,
okay.
they don't really buy any bulls that aren't A2. So it's kind of made it so like the whole breed is shifting that way.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You mentioned you're using beef bulls on some of your cows. What beef breeds are you going with?
The majority we are going with is just Angus, just because it's really cheap semen and it's
Oh, yeah.
good fertility and easy calving. We do use a little bit of Wagyu just as a bit of an experiment. So we have some steers on the ground. I haven't butchered anything yet, but we have some Jersey Wagyu steers. So looking forward to that.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll see. Like I, I'm going to grass finish them. They're grass fed and grass finished. And I raise them on cows. I don't ball raise them. I just put them on a nurse cow and raise them on a cow. So I think it'll be interesting to see. Like, I don't see many Wagyu that's grass fed. Most Wagyu is grain fed. So it'll be interesting to see what
Right.
the results are. And
Yes.
both in like visual marbling and flavor, because I'm sure you know the difference between a grass fed steak and a grain fed steak. There's a bit of a flavor difference. And
Right.
it's mainly comes from the fat. So if you have twice as much fat, you're gonna have twice as much flavor difference. And yeah, so we'll see. I hope it's not, too extreme, I guess.
Oh, yeah. It'll be interesting to see and how that goes. Now, you mentioned something there. You raise those calves on nurse cows. Do you raise all your calves on nurse cows?
No,
Oh, okay.
yeah, majority of our heifer calves get raised on a bottle. Any breeding bull that we're gonna keep gets raised on a cow because they have a much better temperament when they're older if they're raised on a cow.
Oh, yes.
And
I hadn't thought about that, but that's a great point about that.
yeah, it makes a big difference. And the people who buy those bulls from us comment on it too, how it's like night and day, the difference between raised on a cow compared to raised on a bottle. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, we have done the odd heifer calf raised on a cow. It's a little bit better now with the robot because I'm not the one getting kicked when I
Right.
when I go to milk
Well,
them. But in the old time, so it wasn't
Well-
very much fun.
I was thinking as you said that, boy, I wouldn't want a heifer raised on a cow.
No, we used to put Jersey embryos in beef cows actually, and let
Oh, yeah.
the beef cow raise the Jersey calf once it was born. But we did that for 2 seasons, and once we started calving about, we never did that again because
Oh,
they
yeah.
were wild, and they never lost it their whole life. Like, they could be old
Oh, yeah.
cows, and they still just had that little bit of edge to them that you didn't really want to be working with on a daily basis.
Yeah. I've never raised any dairy heifers on cows, but I have had a few dairy goats just off and on. And I've had some raised on the nanny or on the doe versus us bottle raising them. And the ones that are raised on the doe are just so much more crazy for a simple word.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's time we transition to our overgrazing section. At Redmond, we know that you thrive when your animals do. That's why it's essential to fill the gaps in your herd's nutrition with the minerals that they need. Made by nature, our ancient mineral salt and conditioner clay are the catalyst in optimizing the nutrients your animals get from their forage. Unaltered and unrefined, our minerals have the natural balance and proportion that your animals prefer. This gives your herd the ability to naturally regulate their mineral consumption as they graze. Our minerals won't just help you improve the health of your animals, but will also help you naturally build soil fertility so you can grow more nutrient-dense pasture year after year. Nourish your animals, your soil, and your life with Redmond. Learn more at redmondagriculture.com. And for the overgrazing section, we take a deeper dive into some practice on your operation. And today we're going to talk more about your forages and specifically your forage mixes that you are putting down. Because as you graze dairy cows, it's very different than grazing beef cows or hair sheep. I like to think of beef cows and hair sheep as beginner grazer friendly. But when you talk about dairy cows, they have much more nutritional requirements than those other classes. So what are you doing so that your forages can meet as much of that as they can?
Well, the biggest thing for the dairy herd, like when we were talking about grazing, milking, lactating cows, is you're right. We need to keep like a really high plane of nutrition. And so that's where your pasture management really comes in terms of going to the pasture that's ready. When it's ready, always trying to graze in that vegetative state, the plant, before it starts going into the reproductive state, because that's when it changes from putting, energy into the leaves to putting energy into trying to make a seed. And so we're usually a fairly short rotation because we're grazing it, and then we want to be back onto it before it heads out a second time. So we're like in our area, it's like 30 to 35 day rotation where we're coming back to it really quick and trying to keep it in that vegetative state.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, excellent points there. Are you grazing mainly perennials or annuals?
Our pastures are split up that majority of it is perennials, multi-species perennial mixes. So at this point, those mixes are usually made up of about 4 or 5 legumes, like alfalfa, a clover or two, Sicer milk vetch, bird's foot trefoil. Those ones will be in there. And then we usually have a brome grass and then something like chicory, or a plantain or something like that. So those are our perennial mixes. And like our fields will be mainly perennial pastures, but then we will have about 10 to 15% of our pastures sowed down to a multi-species annual mix.
Oh, okay.
And so in those mixes, usually we have forage oats, forage peas, Italian ryegrass, turnips, clover, and then depending on the year, we're always trying something different in our mixes. So we'll have like kale, hairy veg, sorghum, just a bit of everything. We try a few different things every year.
On those annuals that you're sowing, are you using no-till, or are you going in and tilling that and using a prepared seed bed?
We've been doing majority no-till. We bought a John Deere drill 6 years ago and switched to going no-till, which has been very nice. But we are probably going to start doing a little bit of tillage just because we are a little worried about, I guess, our lack of options for herbicides when you're doing these multi-species mixes.
Oh,
So
yes.
we're kind of going back to the same herbicide year after year, and we're worried that we're going to build up some resistance. So I think we're going to at least experiment again with tillage and just see how that goes that way too.
Do you think with your no-till and using those annuals, your weeds would just take over too much that it's not practical to do it without herbicide?
Yeah, basically, we've done it. I shouldn't say we've tried it without herbicide, but we've done it when we have had a good kill herbicide, and it's
Oh, yeah. Kind of the same.
yeah, kind of the same, and it's really noticeable. You just aren't getting the yield you want,
Oh, yeah.
and just not the production you want out of those.
Oh, yeah. So with your forages, you talked a little bit about that. Earlier on, you mentioned you've only got 5 months of a really good grazing season. So what are you doing to use those forages during the other 7 months?
So we make pretty much all of our own forage on farm. And so it's about split 50-50 between perennials and multi-species annuals. And so our perennial mixes is fairly similar to our pastures, about 4 or 5 different legumes and yeah, basically the same mix. And we'll do 2 or 3 cuts off it. And then
Oh, okay.
our annual mixes, we have basically gone narrowed down to a high digestibility, high protein mix that we're mixing and cutting early to try to get that high digestibility and high protein. And then we have another mix that we call our high starch mix, which we are letting grow a bit further along so that we get some starch out of the grains in that mix and try
Oh, yeah.
to reduce our purchase grain costs.
Now, I think a few years ago you went to Alberta for a hands-on class about soil microorganisms. Let me try that again. About soil microorganisms. How was that class and how did it affect your practice?
It was really good. It was at the Cara Soil Health Lab in Olean, Alberta. And so basically we went and spent one session inside a lab where they showed us how to look underneath a microscope to look at microorganisms. And so that was kind of the idea was that if you wanted to, you could do that at home then once they taught you.
Oh, yeah.
But the microscope was $3,000 and I don't have that much free time. But
Right. It requires like a oil immersion microscope with 100x,
yeah, yeah,
if I recall correctly.
yeah, it was definitely more than like your classroom science lab microscope. But it was really, for me, I found it really beneficial because I'm a visual learner. And so it was nice. I could be looking underneath the microscope and they actually had like a microscope that would show what you were looking at underneath the microscope on the screen, like behind you.
Oh, yes.
And so then the instructor is telling you, it's like, okay, that like what you're looking at right there is a little bacteria, that little dot, or this is like a strand, fungi, and this is an amoeba. And so it's like it's very hands-on and visual. And so for me, it kind of helped. And then the next day we were in more of a presentation area where they were really going through, it's like, okay, so the protozoa comes and it eats this bacteria and digests it. And when it passes through, then it comes out as a variable form of nitrogen for your plants.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's very like, yeah, just put it all together. And I found it very beneficial that way.
Did it cause you to change any practices at home?
Well, I guess probably the biggest thing was it, it motivated me to continue to try to do some different things. And
Oh, yeah.
so on our farm, one thing we haven't touched on yet is that our cows live on a compost bedded pat. And
Oh, yeah.
so the way that works is we put down a bunch of wood shavings and then the cows sleep on there and deposit their manure and urine into the wood shavings. And then twice a day, we take a little cultivator and cultivate this wood shavings and mix in the manure and urine, and it turns into compost. And so the cows are actually living on compost. and we add shavings when we need to, when it needs to get just to dry it out. But otherwise, we're just composting this manure and urine and wood shavings, and then we're using that compost as fertilizer on our farm. And
Oh, yes.
so by going to that soil health lab and like realizing what these microorganisms do, it kind of really, really made me think about like, how can we use our compost even more? So I've since started using some compost extracts from a Johnson Sioux bioreactor they have on farm, and trying out stuff like that as inoculants for our seed and soil inoculants.
It's kind of outside the scope of the podcast, but you're going through that and cultivating it twice a day or incorporating the manure into that compost twice a day. Is that a attachment you have on like a skid loader, or is it on a tractor, or is it by hand?
It's on a little tractor. So it was a 3-point hitch cultivator that had probably been sitting in a tree line for, I don't know, probably at least 40 years. And it got pulled out of the bush and strapped to a little Massey tractor. And
Oh,
so
yes.
it's nice because it's small enough that it just stays in the barn. You don't have to open up any doors or anything to
Oh,
do
yeah.
it. It just got a little parking spot in the barn. We just twice a day cultivate with that.
Oh. Oh, nice, because I thought, boy, by hand, that'd be awful, but how are you doing it?
Yeah.
So that works out good. Have you noticed by going to that compost bed, has it affected your somatic cell count or mastitis incidence any?
Our somatic cell count is usually stays like a pretty respectable number, like around that 80,000 to 120,000. So it's good. I will say that, I think there probably is, we have some type of mastitis that's popping up because we'll have cows that they're not getting sick enough that like I can see, like look at her and be like, she's sick, and
Right.
then treat her. But it's more so just all of a sudden I'll notice that one quarter has gone dry because she obviously had mastitis at one point and
Oh,
we didn't pick
yes.
up on it. So that is frustrating. We're trying to decide if we're going to go the route of like a somatic cell tester in our robot, because you can
Oh,
install
okay.
that, but it is a little pricey, and I've heard mixed opinion on if it worked good or not.
That was kind of my thoughts there, where you're not actively milking them and the robot's doing it. You miss out on that daily feedback, twice a day feedback of how that quarter health or udder health is.
Yeah, definitely. Like that's something that we notice is that you just, you're not when you're not hands on them twice a day, then you're not picking up on those things the way you would in the old barn. So now
Oh,
the
yeah.
next option is spend more money and upgrade the equipment.
Everything costs
Yeah.
money.
Yeah. So it definitely has its drawbacks to the robot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What do you see for the next few years for your dairy? Any changes? Are you continuing as is? What would you like to improve?
I think in the short term, we're just trying to, focus on kind of like the little things. Dairy farming, it's very, there's little things that can make a big difference if you're doing them right. So, that's like dry cow management, even calf raising management, trying to reduce the amount of calves we're raising, stuff like that. In the long term, I could see us probably going towards processing our own milk as
Oh,
a
yes.
way to try to get a premium, because there's really good things about the supply management system, but the one thing that, at least where we are, that is a bit of a negative is that you you don't have as many processors, and so you don't have those,
Oh, yeah.
you don't have those options to go, or we honestly couldn't even go organic if we wanted to. We would have no one to buy our milk where we are.
Oh, yeah.
And it was the same with grass fed. We tried to go grass fed, and there just wasn't a processor that would be, you know, be able to do it for us. So I think if we want to get a premium, whether it's grass fed or organic, I think we would have to just switch to start doing it ourselves, which would be a big step and a whole new thing. But it's probably what we're gonna
Oh, yeah.
it's probably what we're gonna do eventually. So
I love the idea of making cheese. I say that I haven't made very much cheese. I have gone to a cheese making class or two, and I even bought some dairy sheep years ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, that I wanted to start milking, and I never found the time and pushed it high enough on my priority list to get it done. But I love the idea of making cheese. It may be because that's one of my favorite snacks, but
yeah, there's nothing better than fresh cheese curds. Like I've only done it a few times, but like when they're just right fresh, man, can't beat that.
oh, yeah, yeah. No, I agree. Sean, before we move on to the famous four, anything else you'd like to add?
I guess just one other thing, just to go into a little more depth maybe about those multi-species annuals.
Oh, okay.
Like the only thing I would say, just if anyone's listening who's a dairy farmer and has thought about this, is that my advice would be to start simple, just make your own blends rather than go to a premix blend, unless the
Oh, yeah.
unless the seed company that you're looking to buy from is making like a dairy specific premix blend that is like made for dairy quality feed. I would say just do it yourself, because at least in my area, most of these premix blends that are like getting promoted by cover crop seed companies or anything like that, they maybe don't fit that high quality feed that a dairy farmer will need. And so you might be
Oh, yeah.
disappointed. I've heard too many dairy farmers who said they bought a premix, had good yield, but not the quality that they want. Now they're just going back to, monoculture. And so I'd say just, if you're going to do it, just make it yourself and make a blend that fits your program.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think it's very important. Of course, as dairy people know that those nutritional requirements of dairy cows are so much greater than what you're dealing with beef cows, or we can get by on a lot less feeding scrub to them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, beef cows, I mean, they're really good at converting feed. I mean, that's what they're
Oh,
good
yeah.
at. So
Yeah. Well, Sean, it's time for our famous four questions. Today's famous four questions are sponsored by Manderley Farms Grazing Conference. Attention, all farmers, ranchers, and land enthusiasts. Join us for an unforgettable grazing conference on February 21st and 22nd, 2025. At the beautiful Manderley Farms in Pikeville, Tennessee, nestled in the scenic Sequatchie Valley. This is your chance to learn from the best in the business. Our speakers include the renowned Greg Judy alongside the dynamic duo Greg and Debbie Brand. Expect engaging sessions, informative pasture walks, and interactive question and answer sessions with our experts. Discover how to revolutionize your land management with regenerative grazing practices. Whether you're looking to enhance soil health, increase biodiversity, or improve your pasture productivity, this conference is tailored for you. Don't miss this opportunity to grow your knowledge and your farm. For more details and secure your spot, visit www.manderleyfarms.com. That's MANDERLEY. Same four questions we ask of all of our guests. Our first question: what is your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
I can't say that I have too many books specifically on grazing, but probably my best resource is actually our local Ducks Unlimited has a grazing club. And
Oh, yes.
that has been something that has been like a really good resource, whether we do field days where we'll go to a farm or they bring in good speakers. So they've probably been like my best resource apart from, I guess, YouTube. That's always,
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's interesting. Ducks Unlimited. Is that who you said that's doing
yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. That's a resource I don't normally think of.
Yeah, well, we're losing so much, I guess, grassland on the prairies in Canada right now. So much of it is getting converted to just to grain crops. So,
Oh,
so
yes.
Ducks Unlimited is really trying to focus on making beef producers mainly because there's not as many dairy, but trying to help them
Right.
be more profitable so that they stay in business and their land doesn't get converted to cropland. So this
Oh,
is one
yes.
way they're doing it, is offering this grazing club and this resource.
Oh, very interesting. Our second question, what's your favorite tool for the farm?
I really like our John Deere drill. I'm not a big machinery guy, but that's actually something that I always get excited by when I'm driving it.
Oh, yes.
So I like that. And then probably a poly reels is something that, I really like. I like being able to, whether it's, putting a group of, yearlings in a pen where I'm trying to get a ton of trample to get some ground cover, and I make a nice little tiny one, or with the dairy, or just giving them a new piece of grass and seeing them just clip it all off at an even level I like that, to do that.
Oh, yeah. I thought you might say your robotic milker. As I think about milking, it's a love-hate relationship for me. I love milking cows. Part I didn't like was it happened twice a day on a very set schedule, and there was days I was like, "I don't wanna be here." But I really enjoyed it and miss it now, but a robot milker would solve some of those problems.
Yeah, it's definitely still a love-hate.
Yeah.
Except it's a love-hate with technology. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the robot definitely makes our lives more flexible. We're not as set in our daily routine, but
Oh, yeah.
but it's an expensive piece of equipment, and yeah, it's got some pluses and some minuses. So it's definitely not on the top of my favorite things.
Yeah. Our third question, Sean, what would you tell someone just getting started?
So yeah, what I would say to a farmer who's thinking about trying out some of these things that we're doing is just start with something easy. I think about people who are growing barley every year and making silage out of it. It's really easy just to add some clover and some Italian rye to that. And, and just after you cut it for barley, it'll regrow and you can stick some heifers out there to graze it. Or if it's close enough to your barn, you can graze your milking herd. And it would just be a really easy thing to do, just as an experiment to kind of dip your toe in the water.
Yeah, get started, try that out, yeah. And lastly, Sean, where can others find out more about you?
The best place is probably our Facebook page, Clanman Jerseys. In the summer, I definitely am posting more stuff about what's going on day to day on the farm in terms of some of the stuff we're doing. In the winter, it's more pictures of cows. So if you
Oh, very good.
if you like seeing pictures of Jersey cows, then you can see them on there.
Well, we're going to add a bonus question in. Where did the name Clanman jerseys come from?
It came from my grandpa. He picked it, and he picked it because a village that we're like right beside, a mile down the road, is called Clan William. So Clanman is the start of Clan William and the start of Manitoba put together. So Clanman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Well, Sean, we appreciate you coming on and sharing with us today.
Thanks for having me on. It's been a cold 2 weeks in Manitoba, so it's nice to get on and chat about some of the fun stuff that we do around here in the summer months. Get excited for that.
Oh, yeah, it's much too cold to be out doing stuff today here as well. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Grazing Grass Podcast, where we bring you stories and insights into grass-based livestock production. If you're new here, we've got something just for you. Our new listener resource guide is packed with everything you need to get started on your listening journey with the Grazing Grass Podcast. It gives you more information about the podcast, about myself, and next steps. You can grab your free copy at grazinggrass.com/guide. Don't miss out. And hey, do you have a grazing story to share? We're always looking for passionate producers to feature on the show. Whether you're just starting out or have years of experience, your story matters. Head over to grazinggrass.com/guest to learn more and apply to be a guest. We'd love to share your journey with our growing community of grazers. Until next time, keep on grazing grass.